They thought he was finished. No rifle, no supply line, no backup, just wreckage. Twisted aircraft parts scattered across a jungle airstrip bombed into silence. The Japanese soldiers laughed when they saw what he was doing with the scrap, until the jungle started answering back. By the time they understood the mistake, 20 men were already gone, and the weapon that killed them was something no one had ever documented before. This is not a legend. This is not folklore. This is a dark war record of desperation, ingenuity, and the moment survival turned scrap metal into a killing machine. The aircraft never made it off the ground. A damaged Allied plane, already wounded from earlier raids, was caught on the strip during a sudden Japanese advance. Bombs fell fast and low. The runway vanished under fire. Engines burned. Aluminum skin peeled back like paper. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left to fly. Only pieces. The pilot was dead. The radio was crushed. The armory had been overrun. One man survived. A ground crewman, trained to fix aircraft, not fight wars. He hid in the jungle as Japanese infantry secured the wreckage. They searched bodies, kicked debris, and laughed at the uselessness of what remained. Aircraft parts weren't weapons. Scrap didn't shoot back. They were wrong. That night, the survivor crawled back to the wreck. He didn't look at it like a battlefield. He looked at it like a workshop. Aircraft machine guns were designed for one thing: controlled, sustained fire at extreme stress. Even broken, their components were precise. Springs, feed mechanisms, cooling jackets, firing pins. He worked in silence, hands shaking not from fear, but from urgency. There was no manual for this, only instinct. He stripped a damaged aircraft gun down to its core. The barrel was warped, but usable at short range. The feed system was ruined, so he built a crude single-shot chamber from tubing scavenged from hydraulic lines. For a stock, he used a reinforced strut, cut, filed, wrapped with torn fabric and wire. The trigger was the hardest part. Aircraft guns weren't meant for fingers. He made one anyway. By dawn, the weapon existed. It was ugly, unbalanced, unreliable, but it worked. The first Japanese patrol never saw him. They moved confidently through the trees, rifles slung, talking openly. This area was secured. Resistance was finished. From 30 yards away, the improvised gun fired once. The sound was wrong. Louder, sharper, mechanical. One soldier fell. The others froze. They didn't understand what had happened. There was no muzzle flash they recognized. No familiar report. Just death appearing out of the foliage. The second shot came seconds later. Another body dropped. The patrol scattered. They fired wildly into the trees, shouting warnings, convinced they'd stumbled into a hidden unit. There was no unit, just one man and a weapon that shouldn't exist. By nightfall, Japanese command believed enemy forces were operating behind their lines. Patrols doubled. Routes changed. Tension spread. The survivor didn't move far. He didn't need to. The jungle brought them to him. And with every encounter, he refined the weapon, adjusting pressure, reinforcing weak points, learning its limits the hard way. This wasn't marksmanship. It was proximity, close enough to see faces, close enough to hear breath, close enough that every shot mattered. By the end of the second night, the Japanese had confirmed casualties. Not from a platoon, not from an ambush, from something they could not identify. And they were about to learn the truth. The jungle changed after the first bodies were found. It wasn't quieter. It was tighter. Japanese patrols stopped laughing, stopped talking. Rifles stayed shouldered. Eyes stayed low. They believed they were being stalked by a unit, maybe paratroopers, maybe escaped infantry. Something trained. Something organized. They were wrong. The man with the improvised gun stayed close to the wreckage. Not because it was safe, but because it was familiar. Every broken aircraft panel, every bent rib, every exposed cable was something he understood. He slept in fragments. Worked in minutes, moved only when necessary. The weapon had problems. After every shot, the barrel overheated quickly. The recoil was brutal. The firing pin jammed twice, nearly costing him his life when a patrol passed within yards of his hiding place. He fixed what he could: a cooling sleeve made from perforated aluminum skin, a crude shoulder brace reinforced with wire and fabric, a better grip cut from a control yoke handle. This wasn't engineering. It was survival refined by repetition. The next engagement was closer. Too close. A Japanese search team moved methodically through the undergrowth, spacing tight, bayonets fixed. They were hunting tracks now, not rumors. He waited until the lead soldier stepped past him. The first shot dropped the rear guard. The second took the leader before he could shout. The rest fired blindly. Panic-breaking formation. One ran straight toward him. There was no time to reload. The man swung the weapon like a club, metal cracking against bone. The jungle swallowed the sound. After that, the Japanese stopped sending small patrols. They brought more men. Mortar teams shelled suspected hiding areas. Trees splintered. The air filled with dirt and insects torn apart mid-flight. But they still couldn't see him, because he didn't stay where they expected resistance to be. He moved through wreckage fields, places they avoided. Burned-out aircraft hulks. Fuel-soaked ground. Twisted aluminum that cut boots and tore uniforms. To him it was cover. To them it was a graveyard. He used height when he could. Climbing damaged wings. Perching above paths. Waiting. Each shot was deliberate. No warnings. No follow-ups. Fire once. Move. Disappear. By the fourth night, the count had reached 8. Japanese command finally acknowledged the truth. This wasn't a unit. This was one man. And that made it worse, because you couldn't predict him. You couldn't intimidate him. You couldn't exhaust him through attrition. You could only hope to catch him. They offered rewards to local auxiliaries. They threatened villages. They flooded the jungle with men who were tired, angry, and afraid. The man heard them coming before he saw them. Boots, metal clatter. Breathing too fast. He steadied the gun. He had learned its voice now. Learned how it kicked. Learned how it lied, pretending to be empty when it wasn't. Another patrol entered the kill zone. Another body fell. Then another. And the jungle answered back, not with gunfire, but with silence. Because everyone left alive was listening now. By the time the 10th body was found, the jungle was no longer a place of movement. It was a place of waiting. Japanese soldiers stopped advancing in lines. They stopped trusting maps. Every fallen branch became a warning. Every shadow felt deliberate. The man knew something had changed. The air was wrong. Too still. Too careful. They weren't searching anymore. They were hunting. He found the tripwire too late. A thin strand of aircraft cable, salvaged from his own wreck, had been strung low between 2 trees. Not his work. Japanese engineering. Silent. Efficient. He froze mid-step. Breathing slowed. Muscles locked. A patrol waited beyond it, rifles raised, watching the space he hadn't yet entered. They had learned. He backed away inch by inch, retreating into thicker brush, letting insects crawl across his skin, refusing to blink. That night, they tried something else. Fire. Flares burst overhead, turning darkness into harsh white glare. Shadows vanished. The jungle betrayed everything that moved. He pressed himself into the wreckage of a burned fuselage, metal still sharp enough to cut skin. He didn't move when the light washed over him. A soldier walked past close enough that he could smell sweat and oil. Another flare rose. Another. The weapon trembled in his hands. He couldn't fire now. Not without being seen. Not without being surrounded. This wasn't combat anymore. This was containment. They waited for him to make a mistake. So he made a different choice. He abandoned the wreckage. Left behind the familiarity. Left behind the scraps. Left behind the illusion of safety. He took only the weapon and a handful of rounds salvaged from damaged belts. The jungle swallowed him again. He moved at dawn, when exhaustion dulled reflexes. When men trusted morning more than they should. The next engagement wasn't an ambush. It was a confrontation. A Japanese squad crossed his path unexpectedly. Too close for planning, too sudden for stealth. There was no time to retreat. The first shot tore through a chest at less than 10 feet. The second struck before the body hit the ground. He reloaded instinctively. The gun jammed. Metal seized. Spring locked. A soldier charged, screaming, bayonet forward. The man didn't think. He threw the weapon. The impact stunned the attacker just long enough for a stolen sidearm to speak once. Silence returned. 3 more bodies lay in the undergrowth. The gun was damaged now. Cracked housing. Bent barrel. A weapon at the edge of failure. But the number had reached 15, and Japanese command knew it. Orders changed. No more captures. No more caution. They wanted him dead. Mortars returned. Indiscriminate. Angry. The jungle shook. Trees fell like executioners. He was wounded, shrapnel tearing into his leg, blood-soaking fabric, pain blooming with every step. Still he moved. Still he hunted. That night, he fired again. And again. Each shot louder than the last. Each shot harder to control. When the 20th Japanese soldier fell, the gun finally failed. The firing pin snapped. The weapon that should never have existed was finished. So was his margin for survival. He disappeared into the jungle bleeding, limping, leaving behind nothing but bodies and unanswered questions. Japanese patrols searched for days. They found blood. They found tracks. They found nothing else. The jungle did not give him shelter anymore. It gave him away. Every broken branch dragged pain through his leg. Every step left something behind: blood, cloth, proof that he was slowing down. Japanese patrols followed carefully now, not with panic, with certainty. They found the ruined gun first, bent metal, cracked housing, the remains of something that confused their engineers. They photographed it, tagged it, tried to understand how aircraft components had become a ground weapon. They failed, but they didn't need answers anymore. They had a direction. The man knew the hunt was closing when he smelled smoke. Controlled burns. They were pushing him. He turned away from the jungle and towards something worse, open ground near the coastline. No cover, no shadows. Only bomb craters and abandoned supply points left behind during the retreat. He found a shallow depression and collapsed into it. Pain came in waves now, not sharp. Heavy. Exhausting. Sleep crept in without permission. When he woke, voices were close. Too close. Boots stopped. Rifles lowered. Orders whispered. He reached for the sidearm. Only one round left. The first soldier appeared at the edge of the crater. The man fired. The soldier fell backward, dead before the sound finished echoing. Shouts exploded across the ground. The last round was gone. There would be no more fighting. He didn't run. He couldn't. He stayed where he was. Japanese soldiers surrounded the crater, rifles trained, cautious but confident. They had him now. Wounded. Unarmed. Finished. They expected surrender. What they got was silence. He looked at them without defiance and without fear. They pulled him out, hands tied, weapon fragments collected. The wreckage of the gun laid out like evidence of a crime that should not have been possible. Interrogation followed. Questions about units. About commanders. About supply lines. He gave them nothing. They didn't understand how one man had slowed an advance, disrupted patrol routes, and forced command-level changes using scrap metal and stubborn refusal to die. They labeled him dangerous, not because of what he did, but because of how easily he had done it. Execution was ordered, not publicly, quietly, at dawn. But dawn never came for them. Allied aircraft appeared offshore that morning, unexpected, aggressive, precise. Bombs hit positions just beyond the holding area. Confusion tore through the camp. Guards ran. Orders changed. In the chaos, prisoners were moved. Some were lost. Some escaped. Records were burned during the withdrawal. And one name never appeared in any official Japanese report. After the war, Allied intelligence recovered fragments of the story. Bodies counted. Patrol reports contradicting themselves. A weapon design that should not have worked. They concluded only one thing with certainty. 20 confirmed dead. One survivor. No explanation that fit neatly into doctrine. The aircraft scrap was melted down. The jungle reclaimed the rest. And the war moved on, unchanged on paper, but quietly altered by the knowledge that desperation can turn wreckage into resistance. The war did not pause to ask what had happened in that stretch of jungle. It never does. Maps were redrawn. Units were reassigned. New offensives swallowed old losses. The incident was reduced to a handful of lines and scattered reports. Contradictory, incomplete, uncomfortable. 20 men gone. No confirmed enemy unit. No captured weapon that made sense. Japanese officers argued quietly among themselves. Some claimed exaggeration. Others insisted the deaths were caused by a hidden Allied detachment that vanished before contact. No one wanted their name attached to the idea that a single mechanic untrained for infantry combat had turned aircraft debris into a functioning killing tool. That explanation was worse than defeat, so it was buried. On the Allied side, the story surfaced only in fragments. A damaged airfield reclaimed weeks later. Burned aircraft frames. Spent casings that didn't match any issued ground weapon. A rumor passed between intelligence officers that one man had delayed an advance long enough for air support to return. No citation, no commendation, no photograph. The survivor himself never appeared in victory parades or debriefing rooms. He was transferred quietly to a rear unit. Medical records mentioned injuries consistent with shrapnel and prolonged exposure. Psychological notes were brief and carefully worded. He does not discuss the incident. That was all. When questioned years later, after the war, after uniforms were folded away, he refused interviews. Refused memoirs. Refused to let the story become something clean or inspirational. Because it wasn't. There was nothing heroic about the nights he remembered. Only the sound of metal cooling too fast. The smell of burned oil and blood mixing in wet air. The knowledge that every shot meant someone would not see morning. The weapon he built was never replicated, not because it couldn't be, but because no one wanted to admit the circumstances that made it necessary. Wars prefer factories, supply chains, and doctrine. They do not like admitting that desperation and mechanical instinct can bend rules faster than command ever could. The jungle kept its silence, The scrap was recycled, and the record remained incomplete, just another dark corner of a war too large to remember everything it destroyed. When the war finally ended, history chose what it wanted to remember. Battles with names. Weapons with serial numbers. Generals with speeches. It did not choose the mechanic in the jungle. There was no place for him in doctrine or training manuals. No blueprint could explain what he built, because what mattered was not the weapon, it was the moment that forced its creation. Desperation does not follow regulations. In official records, the Japanese losses were attributed to, quote, enemy action of unknown origin. The delay in their advance was blamed on terrain, logistics, poor visibility. Anything but a single human variable that should not have existed. On the Allied side, intelligence summaries mentioned an isolated resistance incident with no tactical value beyond temporary disruption. The file was stamped, archived, and forgotten. That was the end of it. But the lesson remained, unspoken. War is not only fought by soldiers trained for it. Sometimes it is fought by those left behind, surrounded by wreckage, forced to turn understanding into violence because survival offers no alternative. The gun made from aircraft parts was never rebuilt. Not because it failed, but because it worked too well in the wrong hands, under the wrong circumstances, at the wrong moment in history. Its creator returned to civilian life after the war. He repaired engines again, worked with tools that fix things instead of destroying them. He never patented anything, never taught anyone what he had done. Those nights stayed locked behind his eyes. And somewhere in the Pacific, the jungle grew back over bomb craters and burned metal, swallowing the last physical evidence that a man once stood there alone, outnumbered, wounded, and unwilling to disappear quietly. The war moved on. History turned the page. But in that forgotten stretch of ground, the truth remained unchanged. They laughed at what he built, until it started killing them, and by then it was already too late. World War II left behind millions of stories. Most were buried under victories, medals, and official reports. Some were buried because they didn't fit the narrative. This was one of them. No medals, no recognition, no weapon that could be safely explained. Just proof that war doesn't always belong to soldiers or commanders. Sometimes it belongs to the people left with nothing but wreckage and the will to survive. History moved on. The jungle grew back. But the truth never changed. They mocked what he built, until it started killing them. If you want more real, dark, and documented war stories that history prefers to forget, this is Dark War Records.